You're a Roman guard standing outside a sealed stone chamber in Alexandria. Inside that room is Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, Pharaoh, descendant of the Ptolemies, the most powerful woman in the ancient world. She has been locked inside for 7 days. You hear her sometimes, not crying, not screaming, just movement, soft footsteps on stone, the faint rustle of fabric. Occasionally her voice, speaking as if someone else is there, though you know for certain she is alone. Before we go any further, there's something you need to understand about Cleopatra's death. Everything you think you know about it is wrong. The romantic story of the asp hidden in a basket of figs is likely fiction. The image of Cleopatra dying peacefully in her royal bed, surrounded by loyal handmaidens, is almost certainly fiction. What actually happened inside those sealed chambers between August 1st and August 12th 30 before Christ was something far more deliberate, far more calculated, and far more revealing about how Rome destroyed its enemies. This is not a story about suicide. It is a story about a systematic psychological operation designed to break the last pharaoh of Egypt before allowing her to die. The real question isn't how Cleopatra died. It's why Octavian needed her to die in a very specific way, and why he needed 10 days to make it happen. If understanding how power operates at its most controlled and calculated matters to you, consider subscribing. This channel exists to expose the mechanisms of domination that shaped ancient civilizations in ways romantic history prefers to ignore. Let me show you what really happened during Cleopatra's final 10 days alive. The destruction began on August 1st 30 before Christ, inside the tomb Cleopatra had built for herself. Mark Antony was dying. He had fallen on his own sword after being falsely told that Cleopatra was already dead, except she wasn't. She had barricaded herself inside her tomb with her 2 most loyal handmaidens and as much treasure as she could carry. The tomb stood near the Temple of Isis, a solid stone structure, 2 stories high. Massive wooden doors, no easy access points, built like a fortress, because Cleopatra understood that in death she would need the same protection she demanded in life. Antony was bleeding out at the base of the tomb. His men begged Cleopatra to open the doors. She refused. She couldn't risk it. Octavian's soldiers were minutes away. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra and her attendants lowered ropes from the upper level and hauled Antony upward through a high opening, dragging him inside while he was still alive. His blood ran down the stone walls as they pulled. Think about that image. The Queen of Egypt, pulling her dying lover into her tomb because opening the door meant capture. Antony died in her arms on the upper level of that chamber. His final words, recorded by Plutarch, "Do not pity me in this last turn of fate. I was the greatest of Romans, defeated only by another Roman." He died believing his life had meaning. Cleopatra had only minutes to grieve before Octavian's forces arrived, but Octavian did not storm the tomb. He did not break down the doors. He did not force his way inside. Instead, he sent a messenger, Gaius Proculaeus. The message was simple. Caesar wished to discuss terms of surrender and the future of her children. Cleopatra refused to open the doors. She spoke to Proculaeus through a narrow gap in the stone, saying she would only negotiate if Octavian guaranteed her children's safety. While she spoke, Proculaeus's men were climbing the outer walls. They entered through the same opening used to pull Antony inside just hours earlier. They took her by surprise. Cleopatra reached for a dagger hidden in her clothing and tried to kill herself. But the soldiers were ready. They tackled her, disarmed her, restrained her. According to Cassius Dio, Cleopatra screamed as they seized her, "You will not take me alive to Rome. You will not parade me. Kill me now." But the soldiers had explicit orders: keep her alive. Use whatever force was necessary. Do not let her die. They carried her from the tomb, transported her to the palace, sealed her inside a guarded chamber on the 2nd floor. That moment, August 1st, was when the real destruction began. Octavian didn't simply want Cleopatra dead. He needed something specific from her death. And that required time. Egypt, the wealthiest kingdom in the ancient world, was now his. But in Rome, he faced a problem. He had just won a civil war, Romans killing Romans. Blood spilled by citizens against citizens. He needed to justify it. He needed to transform a civil war into something easier to accept. A war against a foreign enemy. A war against a dangerous queen from the east, who had corrupted Mark Antony and threatened Rome itself. But Cleopatra wasn't a barbarian. She was educated, multilingual, politically skilled. She had lived in Rome, spoken Latin, met senators, negotiated with Cicero. Romans knew she wasn't a caricature, and that was the problem. Complicated enemies don't make effective propaganda. Octavian needed to simplify her, to turn her from a political rival into a symbol. The Eastern temptress, the Egyptian witch, the foreign corruption that had to be eliminated for Rome to survive. And above all, he needed to parade her through the streets of Rome in his triumph, alive, because Cleopatra knew exactly what that parade meant, and she would rather die than let it happen. But Octavian had 10 days to make sure she didn't. Octavian needed the Roman people to see the dangerous queen defeated, humiliated, broken. Roman triumphs followed a formula. A defeated enemy king or queen was led through the streets of Rome in chains, displayed to the crowd, publicly degraded, and at the end of the parade, traditionally executed in the Tullianum prison. This was how Rome celebrated victory, through ritualized humiliation of the conquered. Octavian's entire political future depended on that spectacle, on parading Cleopatra through Rome as living proof that he had defeated the East. But Cleopatra understood that formula. She had seen triumphs before. She had been in Rome in 44 before Christ, during Caesar's Gallic triumph. She had watched as Vercingetorix, the Gallic king, was dragged through the streets in chains and then strangled to death in the Tullianum. She knew exactly what Octavian intended for her. Two wills in direct opposition, 10 days to resolve the conflict. This is how Octavian approached the problem. The chamber where Cleopatra was held was chosen carefully. Second floor of the palace. One door, one small window, too narrow for a person to pass through. Guards stationed outside day and night. Everything potentially dangerous removed. No knives, no daggers, no ropes. No sharp objects of any kind. According to Plutarch, they even searched her clothing and hair every single day, checked for hidden weapons, checked for poison, checked for anything she might use to kill herself. Cleopatra was stripped of everything except basic clothing and placed alone in an empty stone room. But Octavian's strategy went beyond confinement. He didn't just need to prevent her from dying. He needed to break her desire to die. Think about the psychology. Cleopatra wanted death because death meant dignity. Death meant control. Death meant Octavian could never parade her through Rome, so Octavian had to reverse that instinct. He had to make her want to live. And to do that, he used the one thing she could not surrender: her children. Cleopatra had 4 children. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, was 17. The younger 3 twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, both 10, and the youngest, Ptolemy, just 6, were Mark Antony's. Octavian's men separated them from their mother immediately, moved them to different parts of the palace, kept them under guard. On August 2nd, the day after Cleopatra's capture, Octavian sent another messenger. Not Proculius this time, but Gaius Cornelius Gallus, poet, soldier, diplomat. The message was precise, controlled, elegant in its cruelty. Caesar wishes you to know that your children are being well cared for. Their future depends entirely on your cooperation. Should anything happen to you, Caesar cannot guarantee their safety. Caesarion, in particular, is in a very delicate position. Cleopatra understood immediately. Caesarion was Julius Caesar's biological son. That alone made him a threat to Octavian, whose authority rested on being Caesar's adopted heir. If Cleopatra died, Caesarion would be unprotected. He would be killed. But if Cleopatra lived, if she cooperated, if she submitted, if she allowed herself to be used, then maybe Caesarion would survive. Maybe all of her children would. This was the trap. Octavian gave Cleopatra a reason to live that directly contradicted her reason to die. Her dignity demanded death. Her children demanded survival. For the next 10 days, Cleopatra existed inside that impossible choice, the space between dignity and motherhood. On August 3rd, the pressure escalated. Octavian sent architects to her chamber. They arrived with measuring rods, marked ropes, wax tablets for notes. They measured her height, her approximate weight, the dimensions of her body. According to Plutarch, based on testimony from one of Cleopatra's surviving handmaidens, the queen asked what they were doing. Preparing for Caesar's triumph, one of the architects replied. The display must be properly constructed to accommodate you. Think about the impact of that moment. They were measuring her like an object, like furniture, like a figure to be built into a structure. They weren't just collecting measurements, they were delivering a message. This is happening. You are going to Rome. We are building the cage now. And they returned the next day, August 4th, then August 5th, then August 6th. Each day, more measurements, more questions. What clothing would she wear? What jewelry would Roman audiences recognize? Whether she would be in chains or simply restrained. They discussed it in front of her, debated details, the presentation, the visual effect. They spoke about her humiliation as if it were an artistic project. This was not planning. This was conditioning. Every day the architects returned, death became more appealing. But every day, Octavian balanced that pull with another message. Reports about her children. Caesarion asked after you today. He's worried. He needs his mother. Pull her toward death with the horror of the triumph. Pull her back toward life with fear for her children, and trap her between the two. Cleopatra was alone in that chamber. Her two handmaidens, who had been with her in the tomb, Iraz and Charmian, were kept in separate rooms. She could hear them sometimes, their voices carrying faintly through the stone, but she was not allowed to speak to them. No one to talk to, no one to plan with, no one to share the weight of the impossible choice she was being forced to make. According to Cassius Dio, Cleopatra repeatedly asked to see her children and was refused every time. Not until Caesar is certain of your cooperation. But she could hear them. The palace walls were stone, and sound travelled easily. Sometimes she heard the younger children playing, laughter drifting through the narrow window, too small for anyone to climb through. Think about that torture, hearing your children nearby, knowing they're close enough to hear, but not close enough to touch, not knowing whether the sounds are real or staged, not knowing if they are safe or if the sounds are part of the manipulation. Modern psychology would call this learned helplessness. Strip someone of agency, remove their choices. Make them dependent on their captor for even the most basic information about the people they love. Octavian was executing that process with precision. By August 7th, according to Plutarch, Cleopatra stopped eating. When guards brought food, she refused it. She sat in the chamber, silent, staring at the stone walls. The guards reported this immediately. Octavian's response was not to force her to eat. It was to bring Caesarion. For the first time in 6 days, Cleopatra saw her oldest son. The meeting was brief. Guards stood close the entire time. But Plutarch records what Caesarion said to his mother. "Please eat. Please take care of yourself. I need you. We all need you." Then the guards took him away. That night, Cleopatra ate. And that tells you everything. The threat to her children was no longer abstract. It had a face, a voice, a plea. How do you choose death when your son is begging you to live? On August 8th, Octavian came himself. It was the first time he had spoken directly to Cleopatra since her capture. He came alone, except for guards stationed outside the door. We don't have a complete record of what was said, but fragments survive. From Plutarch, who interviewed survivors. From Cassius Dio, who had access to Roman records. From Strabo, who was in Alexandria shortly after these events. The offer was simple. Participate willingly in the triumph. Walk through Rome under your own power, not in chains. Retain some dignity in defeat. In exchange, your children live, all of them, including Caesarion. They will be raised in Rome as wards of the state, educated, protected, given futures, refuse, and Caesarion dies the day you die. The younger children might survive, they might not. No promises were made. Cleopatra asked for time to consider. Octavian gave her 3 days. After that, we sail for Rome, with or without your cooperation. Choose. This is the brilliance of the trap. Octavian wasn't offering an escape. He was offering justification. A way for Cleopatra to tell herself that enduring humiliation served a higher purpose. That surrender was not weakness, but sacrifice for her children. It was a lie. Octavian was never going to spare Caesarion. The boy was too dangerous. But Cleopatra didn't know that yet. For 3 days, she lived suspended between hope and despair. Then, on August 11th, 30 before Christ, something changed. We don't know exactly what happened. The sources are unclear, fragmented, but something made Cleopatra understand the truth. Maybe she overheard guards speaking. Maybe someone loyal to her managed to pass a message. Maybe she simply understood Octavian well enough to see through the performance. However it happened, by August 11th, Cleopatra knew. Caesarion was going to die. The negotiations were theatre, the promises were hollow, cooperation would change nothing. Octavian intended to kill her son, regardless of what she chose. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra then requested permission to visit Antony's tomb. She said she wished to make offerings, to honor his memory before the journey to Rome. It was a reasonable request, and Octavian granted it. She was taken to the tomb under heavy guard, allowed inside for 1 hour. The soldiers watched as she made offerings, watched her pray, watched her pour libations over the place where Antony had died. They did not see her palm the small clay vial hidden within the tomb's wall. They did not notice her slip it into her clothing. When she was returned to her chamber, Cleopatra asked for a meal. She specifically requested figs, fresh figs from the market. The guards inspected the basket carefully. They looked for hidden weapons, poison, anything dangerous. They saw only fruit. They let it through. This is where the story of the snake enters. The popular version claims Cleopatra hid an asp, an Egyptian cobra, inside the basket of figs. It's dramatic, symbolic. The cobra was associated with Egyptian royalty, but several ancient historians, including Strabo, doubted that account. The timeline doesn't align. The symptoms recorded don't clearly match cobra venom, and snakes are notoriously unreliable as methods of suicide. What makes more sense, based on the evidence, is that Cleopatra had obtained poison earlier, that she hid it in Antony's tomb during the days she was barricaded there, and that she retrieved it during her final visit. What happened next would end the 10 days, and decide whether Cleopatra died broken or in control. The exact method matters less than what happened next. August 12th, 30 before Christ. Early morning. The guards outside Cleopatra's chamber heard nothing unusual. No screams, no struggle, just silence. Around the 3rd hour, they opened the door to bring her breakfast. Cleopatra was dead. She lay on a golden couch, dressed in royal regalia. Her 2 handmaidens were with her. Iris was already dead at the foot of the couch. Charmian was still alive, using her remaining strength to straighten the diadem on Cleopatra's head. According to Plutarch, one of the guards asked her, "Was this well done?" Charmian replied, "Extremely well-fitting for a descendant of so many kings." Then she died. Cleopatra was 39 years old. This was not a suicide born of despair. It was a final act of control. For 10 days, Octavian had tried to break her, tried to make her choose life so he could parade her through Rome, tried to use her love for her children to force her to surrender her dignity. Her death was her refusal. Her final message: "You can take my kingdom, you can destroy my line, but you cannot take my choice. You cannot parade me, you cannot have that victory." She died on her own terms, dressed as a queen, surrounded by the symbols of power Octavian had worked so carefully to strip away. But here is the final cruelty. Octavian won anyway. He could not parade the real Cleopatra, so he built a substitute, a statue, an effigy. During his triumph in Rome, a massive image of Cleopatra, with a snake attached to her arm, was carried through the streets. The Roman crowd saw Cleopatra in Octavian's triumph, saw her defeated,